any members of the public in. And yeah, hi, Mr. Carlton. Great.
All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Faraz Khan. I'm the presiding officer of the Texas Board of Medical Radiologic Technology, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 9:02 a.m. on June 24, 2022. And I will start with roll call of the board members.
Yes, good morning, everybody. For the roll, Dr. Khan.
Present.
Dr. Beckman.
Here.
Mrs. Brandt.
Here.
Mrs. Brown, who's not going to be with us today. Mrs. Landreth.
Here.
Mrs. Lutz.
Here.
Mr. Morin.
Here.
Mrs. Parker.
Here.
And Mrs. Waddell.
I see everybody. All right. Thank you. Appreciate your help. Bye-bye.
All right. Looks like we have a quorum. We will proceed to the next item, which is a board member report.
Yep, and again, this is the board members' opportunity to bring anything up to their fellow board members or to staff or anything they would like to share with everyone else at this time. Nothing particular that you have to do. It's just your opportunity.
All right, if there are no comments or concerns, then we will move on to item number 3, Executive Director's Report.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Khan. Again, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you virtually this morning yet again. Dr. Khan, sorry I'm not there at the hobby building with you. They may have let you know that we were able to take a family vacation that was delayed for almost 2.5 years now. It was a cruise. We waited so we'd make sure that we didn't get sick when we went. And on the night we got back, my wife tested positive for COVID. So I'm feeling fine. I don't have any symptoms. She's doing a lot better. But just out of an abundance of caution, I decided I'd go ahead and just stay home for today and not unnecessarily expose anyone there in the hobby building. Anyways, thank you for your understanding. We'll go ahead and get into our budget update, and I will turn it over to Joey.
Thank you, Brent. Good morning, board members. So I'll be real brief on our budget report. So you should have a report that provides numbers through the end of May. As you can see, we're about 87% budget execution, and on page 2 towards the right, you'll see our revenue collections. We're about 92% of what we told the legislators we would collect for this fiscal year. I do have some tentative data through June 14th, and I'm estimating us to be actually at 90% for our budget execution, and our revenue collections are at 97%. So you'll have an updated budget report for the end of June, hopefully the first or second week of July. Also, just an update on our revenues. I'm projecting for us to collect anywhere between 35 and 37 million through the end of August. So this is on trend with what we've been collecting previously in prior years. We're trending up, and we're close to about 500 to $1 million over what we collected last year. And then also, I am in the process of updating our legislative appropriations request for fiscal years 24 and 25. So you'll start seeing more information about that as we prepare for that and get our submission together to submit sometime in August, September timeframe. And then lastly, there's been conversations about travel and increasing more travel in fiscal year 2023 for our agency employees and our board members. So again, that just depends on availability of funding, but I will be putting together some guidelines, updating procedures, and providing training and whatnot, just to give everybody a refresher on the do's and don'ts of travel, what you can and can't do, what you will and will not get reimbursed for. So there's been a lot of questions. So happy to answer if anybody has any questions when it comes to travel or anything else. And then, as always, you can contact Brent or you can contact our travel coordinator, Raul Pacheco, if you have any questions when it comes to travel. So pending any other questions, I'll hand it back to you, Brent.
Great, thank you, Joey. As Joey mentioned, overall doing well for funding, and we are looking to potentially start having some in-person meetings again. But as Joey said, it is dependent on funding. And as you all remember, we did have to give back 5% of our budget to the legislature last year. And so, that part of that money that we gave back came from our travel budget since we weren't traveling anyways. And we'll see if we can get it back in this next legislative session. But we'll see how many dollars we have left. For our building update, we are still slated to move into the new Bush building at the end of August, beginning of September timeframe. It's possible that could slide to later in the year. Some agencies that were already supposed to have moved in by now were pushed into July. So it's still a little bit tentative on when we're going to get into the new building. But one way or another, we all have to be out of the building by the end of kind of the October timeframe and into the new building. Our new boardroom may not be ready until January. That's the new shared use boardroom in the new building. So we are going to still be doing virtual meetings for the time being, at least into the beginning of next calendar year. But we should have a brand new, we will have a brand new, but it should be ready to go, a new ISC room that's going to be larger than the one we currently have in the hobby building. And we may be able to hold meetings in there if the new boardroom is not ready to go. But that's all pending the arrival of IT equipment that our IT staff has ordered. And with supply chain issues, a lot of that stuff is on back order as well. And it all has to be tested, set up and tested before it can be installed in the hobby building, in the Bush building. So we'll have to unbox it, set it up, make sure it all works, rebox it, send it back over to the new building before we can officially start using it there. But overall, personnel, not a lot of changes as far as the structure of the medical board, but we are starting to see a bit of an uptick in the amount of people that we have in turnover and going into new positions. So obviously something we're keeping an eye on and keeping track of, and that we are going to speak to the legislature about in helping us alleviate the issues that our staff have with things like inflation and the price of gas and things that make it more difficult if they have to travel into work. And so we want to make sure that we can definitely take care of our employees. But pending any of your questions, that will complete my executive director report.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Carlton.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, medical director report.
And Dr. Brett is unable to join us today, but he does not have anything for you guys.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 5, consideration and possible action regarding pending litigation.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is Scott Freshour. It's real short today, too, on this one. Just need to let you know that we had a case at the Texas Supreme Court I've been telling you about. It was a physician who was challenging an MPDB report we had filed. We had filed a revision to action report after the board had issued a final order after a SOA proceeding. The doctor had asserted we should have asserted a void report because the SOA judge didn't find the violations as alleged by staff, and we had dismissed the complaint. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed with the physician that we have to file a void report. And what they did was they remanded it or sent it back to the lowest state court, which is the state district court. And they will send what's called a mandate, which is their particular instructions. We're waiting on that. So it's pending litigation, but basically it's resolved to the extent that the court has ordered us, but we still have one more court to tell us exactly how to do it. So once we have heard from that court, which we have a hearing set in early July, I'll report back on it to you all the next meeting. It's considered pending litigation right now, so I really can't say anything else other than what has happened procedurally and the status of it. I'll be glad to answer any questions, but that would be my litigation report for this time. No suits pending against your board or anything of that nature. And again, as always, thank you very much for that. The medical board keeps myself and Miss Tudhill and Miss Pajak and Mr. Carlton and everyone busy enough. So we appreciate you not adding anything unnecessarily. So that is my report, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Freshour. All right, we will move on to item number 6, Texas Health Program.
Well, thank you, Mr. Khan. We have 2 cases for your consideration today. The first requires a motion, and the second is notification of a emergent referral. The first case, which you should have in your packet, is PHP number 21-0101. This is a 37-year-old medical radiologic technologist. The reason for referral is admitted relapse. There is a subsequent positive testing confirming the relapse. There's also a history of a missed check-in. This participant has been presented to the governing board and to the MRT-D&E before. The case came to us in January of 2021 due to legal charges. Early on in their participation, they experienced a relapse. They participated in treatment, successfully completed treatment. They then had a death in the family and reported their own relapse prior to testing. But then we have confirmatory testing. The plan is to increase meeting attendance, and with any positive testing is increased. This was presented to the Texas PHP Governing Board, and they have requested that the case be returned to the Texas PHP for continued monitoring.
All right, thank you. I'll entertain any motions from the board regarding this matter.
I move that we accept the recommendation and move this case back to PHP.
I will second.
All right, great. We have a motion to accept the recommendations to return the case back to PHP from Ms. Waddell and seconded by Ms. Lutz. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any against? No, the motion carries to refer the case back to Texas PHP.
Thank you so much. And then we have one emergent referral for reporting purposes only, case number 20-0803. Again, a referral due to a legal issue, was emergently referred to the board after multiple attempts to remediate, essentially unilaterally withdrew from the program, unable to contact participant, no longer checking in and no longer testing. My understanding is that no motion or action is required. This is informative. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions. And Mr. Bernardo is here. You have in your packet participant reports. And so if you have any questions for us about the Texas PHP, we'd be happy to answer them.
All right, if there's no questions, thank you so much, Ms. McQueen.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item number 7, which is discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding applicants appearing concerning eligibility.
Yes, we have one applicant that's appearing today, applicant number 2522. This is an appeal of the executive director determination. The applicant has not actively practiced as a medical radiologic technologist since 2012. She did provide a statement saying that she'll be applying to several hospitals in Texas to travel as an MRI technologist in the near future, and that's why she's trying to obtain the Texas MRT license at this time. Because it wasn't clear to board staff how many hours per week the applicant at the Mayo Clinic Hospital MRI tech, PET, MRI position was actually practicing the administration of radiation, board staff requested additional information from the Mayo Clinic Hospital. We did see a copy of the job duties and descriptions from Vicki Place, the MRI supervisor at the Mayo Clinic, and the copy of the job description is in the summary on page 2. Board staff just wanted to clarify and reached out to Ms. Place to explicitly ask how many hours per week the applicant worked administering radiation, to which Ms. Place stated, MRI techs do not administer radiation. The applicant did submit CME activity transcript that documented 29.5 category A CEUs in non-MRI topics from September 2019 to October 2019. So because the applicant had not actively practiced as a medical radiologic technologist administering radiation since 2012, which was approximately 9 years from the date of the application, the board staff made the following recommendation: that she would need to practice for 6 months under the supervised temporary permit with submission of the work log and evaluation at the end of the 6 months. This recommendation is based on the active practice remedy matrix that you as a board created for board staff to offer applicants with an active practice issue. She is appealing this, citing that she is ART certified to perform CT, IR, MRI, and X-ray if there's a need for it. Although I have not performed these in a few years, I have been still keeping current my certifications and licensed to perform these other modalities through ART governing license. I'm always able to perform these even if they are not the current modality I have been working in. I pay annually and have certifications in each of these modalities. I'm competent to perform these if the opportunity permits. There are several academic institutions that require the MRT in order to work in Texas in MRI for their personal requirements. And to supplement that, she did provide board staff with copies of MRI job posting opportunities at Memorial Hermann in Texas. So because she is appealing the active practice remedy that she was offered based on the matrix, she is here before you today. Applicant 2522, if you're present, you can unmute your mic, and if you have an opening statement, you can say it at this time. And if not, then the board members can just start asking you questions about your application. I see applicant 2522, but I'm not able to hear her.
I do see that she's unmuted,
Mhm.
but I don't hear her as well. Let's see. I also don't see that her video is on. Okay. I see that you've raised your hand, applicant 2522. Perhaps you could reach out to whoever you coordinated your attendance with today and let them know what your technical problems are. If there's an analyst.
Yeah, if you're using a smartphone, maybe, and you're just calling in, maybe hang up and call back in, or use your smartphone to click the link that you were provided. Or you can just if you're on a computer, even get out and re-log in, close out your browser and go back in through that same link. But also make sure you grant access to your microphone and camera and whatever device you're using. But that may work.
Yeah.
I always turn things off and turn it back on is usually the first step of my technology support, but that might be the best thing to do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Wendy.
Sure.
Okay, I think she's left.
She's out, yeah. Obviously, she could hear us, so that was good.
Yeah. And we don't have a chat function, so that's why, unfortunately, she couldn't communicate in any other way.
And my board staff is also reaching out to her via email to maybe see if she can explain what the technical difficulty is.
Thanks. Okay, I see that she's rejoined.
Also, if you have like a set of headphones or something of that nature to just give it a different audio device to try to go through, that might be a good idea.
Applicant, can you hear us? Can you respond and see if we can hear you? We are not hearing you.
Mhm.
Your hand is up now. You've raised your hand. Do you see a toolbar that has like a video camera and a microphone looking icon that maybe have a slash through them, and maybe you need to unslash them?
Tell you what, please check your email. So Grace, you said that an email was sent to the applicant.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so please just check your email. And I think ultimately there's a phone connection where you can just connect by audio, and that might be the way to go. In the meantime, what we could do while we get these issues ironed out, Dr. Khan, is we could table this and come back to it. We could go ahead and handle some other business and then.
Can you hear now?
Oh, yes.
So I'm on the phone.
Great. That works. We can hear you.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. I've joined Teams 1,000 times. I don't know what happened. I had my microphone off, so I apologize.
Well, no,
I mean, I
thanks
had my
for
microphone
continuing.
on, but my camera wouldn't turn on.
Well, thanks so much for continuing to try, and we do
Yeah.
hear you now. So
Okay.
that's great. Yeah, the floor is yours. However you'd like to get started, you can give a little introduction about yourself and then go right into the merits of your appeal, or you can just open it up for questions, however you'd like to proceed.
Yes. So we currently, even though I currently am in practice and current with the ARRT, I have just, recently working at Mayo Clinic, have been required to wear a radiation badge just because we're around radionuclides all day long. So I know it's a form of irradiation, but it's within the scope of imaging. And I also have a licensure that's current in CT, CV, as well as X-ray that I currently keep active through the ARRT. So their stance on this is that if I ever decided to fall back on that, and which I do because I plan on being a travel tech, and the hospitals that I'm applying for, as I've posted, there are several of them that are just MRI postings that they are requiring this MRT licensure. That's all I have.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. All right.
You're
so,
welcome.
Board members, this is your opportunity to ask any questions.
Hi, I have a quick question. So you haven't practiced radiography specifically in 9 years now. Are you planning on doing radiography, or you just want to get a 100% MRI job, or you're open to whatever opportunity?
Yes. So I plan on staying within MRI. But
Okay.
there are some hybrid positions where they do ask, are you willing to do this as a dual job duty? And I would be willing to do that in the future, but it's not something that is a first choice of mine.
What have you done in the last 9 years besides some CME, like anything other than CME or including CME, I guess, to stay current on radiography practice?
Just CME, just the continuing education.
Okay. And a question for the board, are we able to grant a restricted license that said that, a license to for MRT requiring that would allow her to practice MRI, but if she wanted to practice radiography, she would have to complete some supervised monitoring for a period of time?
Yeah, so your options in this case, the standard option is to, as Ms. Unterborn laid out, require a period of monitoring, right, to address the out of practice time period. That doesn't require any sort of disciplinary order or anything like that. It would require that the case be deferred until she completed the requirements, and then upon her successful completion, she would be granted the license. If there are any issues during her period of monitoring, she would come back before the board, right? Now, you could grant her, alternatively, you could, through a disciplinary order, a public disciplinary order, grant her a restricted license, but that would be, it would have to be based on a violation, right, of the medical or the MRT Act. The issue with that is, at this point, this is a threshold eligibility issue. This is not some sort of competency or unprofessional conduct issue. And so we have been reluctant in the past to address this type of simple eligibility problem with a disciplinary order when her threshold eligibility deficiency is not a violation of the act. It's simply she doesn't qualify unless she addresses this. So I would recommend that you do not recommend an agreed order. That would be reported to the National Practitioner Data Bank, right? It would be a restriction on her license, which would be seen as an adverse action. And so that's why I would recommend that if you require any period of monitoring, you do it through the standard process. That would be a deferral, allow her to complete the process, and then get a free and unencumbered license contingent on her completing all of the requirements successfully.
And to elaborate on what Ms. Tuthill said, this is an appeal, so you have the option to either deny her appeal,
Right.
and
Thank
the
you.
original recommendation would stand that she would need to comply with that 6-month supervised temporary permit with the submission of the work log and the evaluation following that. And the permit would have to be, she's doing, administering radiation. She could not just do MRI under that supervised temporary license. So that would have to be made very clear that this was 6 months practicing administering radiation under a supervising practitioner. So that would be denying the appeal, and the original recommendation stands, or you could grant the appeal and then make some other type of recommendation if you don't think 6 months of the supervised temporary license is enough or too much or anything like that. So you'd first need to determine if you're going to grant or deny the appeal, and then following that, what she would need to comply with in order to then be, upon successful completion of your criteria, then be allowed to be issued a full MRT license.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Absolutely.
Yeah, this seems like a sticky issue. Just I agree that I know that there are definitely places out there that require an MRT license in order to get a job in, being an MRI tech. And so it seems difficult to have someone have to work a job that they're really not working at the time. If you're an MRI tech, to have them go work as an X-ray tech for 6 months when that's not really what their goal is to fulfill this requirement to get an MRT license to work as an MRI tech. And it seems like there should be a carve out for MRI.
I mean, this is something, as the licensure manager, we are seeing, as we have been regulating the MRT profession since the transition, that Texas facilities are requiring a full MRT license, even if they are hiring a practitioner who will only be doing MRI, because that is what that facility is requiring. They need to comply with the licensure and eligibility requirements outlined in the MRT Practice Act and the board rules, which does require that component that they have been actively administering radiation. So it is something we are seeing more frequently, and some applicants that have been given the same remedy are able to do that, and they get the rad tech license, and then they go about. But then others can appeal, such as this applicant now, or just withdraw, or just kind of ghost us in a way. So we are seeing this more frequently.
And I do want to clarify, this is not a requirement under the MRT Act. MRI practice is not covered by the definition of the practice of medical radiologic technology, right? So this is not a law, state law requirement that she have an MRT license to do MRI. It's the facilities requirement.
Well,
Correct.
The problem is that the ARRT lumped MRI under them
Mm.
And that's how you go about becoming a registered MRI tech, is taking an ARRT test.
Got it.
And I
even
do
though
know,
there's no radiation involved with MR, I mean, all of my MR techs have an X-ray background. They cross-trained in MR. They got registered in MR, but it's been years since they took an X-ray. But they have to have their MRT because there is no MR standalone certification, licensing, whatever. It's all lumped under the ARRT.
That's
But
interesting.
I don't think, I mean, I agree with Dr. Beckman. We can't, there's nobody out there that's going to hire her to be an MR tech, and then for 6 months, they're going to have her go over there doing x-rays with somebody holding her hand. It's just not feasible. Everybody is so short staffed. If they hire an MR tech, it's because they need that MR tech scanning MR patients all day long.
and I would say,
And Miss Brandt.
I would say too, I'm sorry, I would say too, that a lot of facilities are requiring that MRT license because of the administration of contrast. And I know that, some facilities, legal departments, as they're administering contrast, they need to have some sort of license per se to do that. I know my facility is one of those.
And Miss Brandt, you had your hand up. Thank you, Miss Lutz.
So I just have a question about the MRT JP exam. So would she be required to take the JP exam to get her license?
She did have to take the JP exam as part of the licensure screening process. That is a lacking item that they are required to complete, just like submitting transcripts, submitting birth documentation, doing fingerprints, etc. So she has taken the JP exam as for this licensure application that is before you.
And she passed it?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. I just feel if she's already taken that and proved competency in X-ray, then I wouldn't have an issue with granting a license.
And if I might jump
I
in, just,
agree.
yeah, but remember the JP exam really, if, I know you're talking about the art on that, Miss Brandt, but the JP exam is just general laws and that, that really competency driven. It's more legal compliance focused, at least from that standpoint. Of course, art handles all the competencies and that kind of thing. So just to be, absolutely clear on those two splitting of that. And I know Mr. Moran has his hand up, and then
Yes.
I might have a loop back depending on the discussion about the appeal as Ms. Unterborn and Ms. Tuthill were discussing.
Mr. Moore?
I guess my only concern about this is when she was at the Mayo Clinic, she was it was an MRI/PET position. And I know that PET is considered a dangerous and hazardous procedure. And I might refer this to Mrs. Waddell. She can, because I don't know a whole lot about those positions. How involved are the MRI techs in doing PET?
Well, that would be a question for this applicant, because in my experience, we wouldn't have someone who was only competent in MR and even in X-ray doing PET. So I'm assuming that it was kind of a two-person job. And if this applicant can answer that, that would be helpful, because I don't know any MR techs who would be doing MR and PET if they're not trained in nuclear medicine.
Can I answer?
Yes.
Yes, I was trained in nuclear medicine as well.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay. So you were doing PET, injecting the patient with that and
Correct.
scanning the PET component and the MR component?
Correct.
Well, then you were administering ionizing material.
Yes, even
So-
though Vicki Place had said we weren't, MRI truly isn't, it's an irradiation, but we were working within administering the radionuclide.
Well, then that solves that problem right there, because you were using ionizing radiation with the PET component of that PET MR job.
Yes. And like I said, I did wear a radiation badge that was recorded there as well.
Right.
And
Well, and I did see on your continuing education that you took a good broad range. It wasn't all focused just on MR. There was a lot of it that still had to do with, ionizing radiation topics. So that's good as well.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Beckman, you've got your hand raised.
yeah, thank you. And just to be clear, if she had been practicing CT, even if she had done no radiography or fluoroscopy, if she'd been doing as working as a CT tech and applied for an MRT license here in Texas, we would have granted it. She would not have been flagged, correct?
So CT involves the administration, right, of radiation, then yes, yes.
Okay.
That's my, just have to get me up to the fundamentals on some of these procedures, sorry. But yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Freshour, before you jump in, I just wanted to make one comment. I think this case brings up a good point, and as with the discussion, in that right now there's no licensure board per se for MRI, and yet we're seeing individual entities requiring an MRT license. So perhaps it's something to put on, our legislative action item, if we want to cover that or how we want to address that in the future, because these cases are just going to increase in number. There's a huge shortage. A lot of technologists, whether MRI or general or CT, are moving to Texas, and so we're going to see a lot more of these cases. So something to, keep our eye on and maybe address it ahead of time rather than later.
Yeah,
And
I
again-
agree that. Sorry.
Dr. Beckman?
Dr.
Go ahead.
Beckman.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I don't know who was speaking.
Sorry. I feel like there should be a carve out for MRT or MRI for an MR tech. Like it's very, very different than the other type of. It's very different from CT and radiography. It feels like it should be its own separate license.
Is an MR tech, just so I understand, different than an MRI tech?
No, they're the same.
No.
Okay. I mean, so there is no licensure requirement for MRI techs currently under current law.
Yeah, well, I guess there's not, but then there is, because facilities require you to get an MRT because there's no MRI tech license. The facilities are using MRT license as a surrogate for MR license. I feel.
And that makes sense. But is the issue that they might be doing MRT procedures in addition to their MRI, just to cover that possibility? So
the issue is that, and it's kind of a splitting hairs basically, right? So technically, MRI techs are not administering ionizing radiation, but just using high-level magnetic fields is not necessarily completely harmless. And so there should be, and you can cause a lot of damage if you're injecting contrast or you're not following proper safety protocols. So there are issues where I think some regulation or some oversight is needed. So whether that's addressed with a separate licensure board or somehow it's looped into, ionizing radiation plus, MR, sort of not radiation, but, basically magnetic resonance supervision. I think that's a legislative issue. That's what I was referring to, Mr. Freshour.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Morin has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just kind of want to clarify some stuff because MRI is kind of my area of expertise. So if you work in a JCO accredited hospital, you're not required to be MRI registered. However, if you work at an outpatient imaging center and you receive Medicare and Medicaid funding, you are required to be MRI registered to work in those facilities. Now, also, there is a dedicated registry for MRI technologists. It's ARMRET, the American Registry of MRI Technologists, that's separate from the ART. So just to clarify that as well.
Got it.
Right. So, and again, kind of bringing it back, as you were saying, Dr. Khan, it may be a legislative issue, and as we all have looked at this, the Radiation Act itself that you all deal with, it's very complicated, because you've got your limiteds and your general, and it's a very complicated scheme, and it does get into the issue of, like you were saying, Dr. Beckman, and part of the problem is you say, well, maybe we need a carve out or a different license, but as Sarah pointed out, it's not you all necessarily that are requiring the licenses, it's the facility. So then the question becomes, do you create a license to accommodate what the hospitals are saying, even though it may not necessarily fit, as Mr. Morin was just saying, right? And you do have, frankly, you as a board can't lobby. We can only say what the impact of a bill is. You can identify issues and impediments. And this is one that is, somewhat unusual from that perspective. You also have to remember that there is, and there has been, a movement towards, do we need as much licensing and certification for all of these different occupations, right? So you've got all of these considerations going into it. Now, getting back to the granular today, if the PET portion of what was described, if you believe that satisfies the experience enough for this individual from the radiation standpoint that would otherwise be lacking, requiring a 6-month temporary, you could grant the appeal and grant the license. The other thing is you could even do a further, as I think you said, Dr. Khan, splitting of hairs, saying, well, we want a temporary license, but we only want 2 months, or to do, and top your MRI, to do MRI work, do 40 radio, x-ray procedures or something. But again, you've got kind of the open playing field. The MRI portion that we're dealing with today wasn't even contemplated by you as a board when you went with this, the 6 and the 12 months, right? Now you've seen a new kind of refinement to deal with. So again, granular to this applicant, if you're satisfied with the PET stuff that she did, and that's a very articulate term, PET stuff, then you could grant the appeal and issue the license, presuming, or if your feeling is that she's safe and competent with that experience. Or you could do something in between, or you could deny, like was initially described, by Ms. Unterborn. So you've got a lot of options here. And again, ultimately, the other issue is if hospitals are using this, but MRI doesn't really fit, but the hospitals are doing it, what are you going to do as a board? You might have to figure out a Band-Aid going forward unless there is a legislative fix. This applicant may be in a more fortunate position than somebody else who comes along next time who has never done anything but MRIs.
May I bring up a point? And I know you're not allowed to discuss other applicants. There's 2 of my closest coworkers and friends who have been granted this MRT licensure with an ART, the same scenario as myself, but they've only practiced MRI, and they are travel techs, and they've been granted the Texas MRT license with just their MRI experience. So is this a new active practice?
Yeah, I mean, no, this is not new. And, each case has individual circumstances that aren't in front of the board right now. So it's impossible to know how they compare or how they differ. So let's just keep the focus on your application, please. Okay. Thanks.
Well, at this point, I don't have any concerns about this applicant and her capabilities. I mean, she's got a wealth of experience in a wide variety of modalities. She's kept up her continuing education in a wide variety. And I move that we grant licensure to this applicant.
Well, so you would move to grant the appeal and issue full licensure. Is that correct, Ms. Waddell? We want the language to be right to
yes.
what you're asking.
Correct. I move that we grant the appeal and issue full licensure to this applicant.
So you got
I'll
a
second.
motion. All right, Mr. Moran has seconded.
All right, so we have a motion to grant the appeal from the applicant for full licensure, put forward by Ms. Waddell and seconded by Mr. Moran. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? All right, the motion to grant the appeal passes.
So applicant 2522, you will receive an email with a separate Teams link that you can click on and join to talk to board staff if you have any questions about the motion that you heard or what to expect moving forward. So you can leave this meeting and join that one. And you're more than welcome to come back into this open meeting after you've talked with board staff if you'd like, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Are we ready for agenda item number 8?
Yes, please go ahead, Ms. Centerborn.
Okay, this is regarding discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding proposed orders offered by the executive director. And there are 3 proposed remedial plans that were offered by the executive director and accepted by the applicant. And I do need a motion for approval, please.
I'll move to approve.
Okay,
I'll
so
second.
okay, did Ms. Parker second? I couldn't hear.
It was actually ended up being somebody else.
I think it was Miss Landreth.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve the agreed upon remedial orders made by Dr. Beckman and seconded by Ms. Landreth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against?
Aye.
No. Okay, the motion passes.
For agenda item number 9, discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding approval, rescinding, or denial of program or instructor, there are none. And then for agenda item number 10, report on program approvals and renewals, there is one LMRT program that meets all the licensure requirements and has been reviewed and approved by the executive director. This is just a report, so there's no motion needed.
All right, very good. So that concludes item number 10. And then we will move on to item number 11, review, discussion, and possible action regarding selected files and cases.
Sure. Good morning, board. I can handle this agenda item. This is Chris Palzel. I'm the Director of Operations for the board. In this agenda item, we have 5 items. Several of them have items for you to vote on and some don't. The first item are the reports. These don't require a vote. This is just an informational item. You have 3 reports in here, but there are no warning letters to report on, so there's no report for warning letters for your board today. The first report you do have is the enforcement report. This applies to the entire, all the boards that we do. So this has the indication, how many investigations, how many cases are in litigation, how many are at SOA. It does break them down by license type somewhat. So you can kind of see how many ISCs and orders and decisions you're taking. The MRT decisions are at the end of this report and kind of compare going back. The goal is to ultimately have 5 years of data here so you can kind of spot trends. And the main trend that is relevant to your board is really related to the other report that we have, which is the criminal history report with the changes in Chapter 53 and how we respond when a licensee is arrested. That has impacted the number of orders, remedial plans, and ISCs you all have. What we do now is anytime there's a licensee is arrested, we receive an alert, a push notification. We do review those, every single one of them. And then in most cases, if it's just an arrest, there hasn't been a conviction. If it's something we could potentially take an action on after the conviction, we do track it. It's something that even if they were convicted of, it wouldn't result in any action. We just do a full dismissal. If there are indications that drugs or alcohol were involved, we do have the ability to refer those to the physician health program or to just provide information on the physician health program, depending on what the incident is. I kind of review this and with other staff and kind of look for spotting any issues. I don't see any issues that would concern me enough to talk to you all about. I think the biggest change again is just the way we look at these criminal cases when there's an arrest. And that has, of course, affected the number of decisions that you all take. There were cases to go to SOA. But we do continue to monitor those. Obviously, if we see something come across that looks like it might pose an imminent threat to patient safety, we do evaluate those and do at times ask you to do a temporary suspension on those cases. So those are the reports that you have in your first folder under agenda item 11. I can answer any questions you have about those. Okay. The next item that you would have, these would be the files that are assigned to members of the disciplinary committee for review. We are doing this a little bit differently this meeting. We continue to sort of adapt to this new world of doing things hybrid and mostly remote. In the old days, we had the blue sheets, the green sheets, the purple sheets. I don't remember all the colors we had. That really worked better when you all were here because staff could kind of come around and kind of hand you your sheet and follow up with you. Now that everybody's, for the most part, participating remotely, we're kind of coming up with a process that works better for this new world. And so what we've done is we've gone ahead and assigned the cases to the members of the committee, but we're going to handle this similar to how you would handle orders. So we're just going to ask for any individual that has one of their cases, if they would like to pull one of their cases for discussion, we can pull it and you can have a discussion and you make a recommendation by motion if you want a case sent back for more investigation, if you want it to be directed to go to an ISC, if you want to get an expert consultant, you can make that motion on your particular case. We would call for a second, have a discussion and a vote. If you don't have any that you need to discuss individually, then you can just, for all the cases in your section, make one motion to accept the recommendation for dismissal. And so the first set of cases that we have are assigned to Ms. Landreth. Just because a case is assigned to a specific board member doesn't mean that other board members can't review it and have questions about it, but we do kind of assign these for simplicity. Ms. Landreth, you just had one case assigned to you, so if you don't want to pull it, you can just, now would be an appropriate time to make a motion to accept the recommendation for dismissal.
I move to accept their recommendation.
And we would need a second.
I'll second the
I'll
motion.
second.
Okay. Okay, and all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, so that motion carries, and that was under the non-standard of care section. That was the only case. Under standard of care, we do have cases that are assigned to individual board members. Dr. Beckman, Dr. Khan, Ms. Litz, and Mr. Moran. Does anybody have any of the cases that are assigned to them that they would like to pull for discussion?
No.
No.
So if none are pulled, then we can have a motion for the entire section for the files for review for standard of care cases. And the motion would be, someone could make the motion to accept the recommendation to dismiss all of the standard of care cases as recommended for dismissal.
I'll make the motion to accept all the cases, to accept the recommendations as stated.
And I
Is there a
second
second?
that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. That completes 11 section 2 on files for review. The next section would be for rules. There are none. Next section would be for follow-up files. There are none. For appeals on the paper agenda, it is marked none, but we did have one added. It was assigned to Mr. Beckman. That is in section 5. It was a case that was dismissed for no jurisdiction not found, meaning that we didn't have enough information to open a formal investigation. So, Beckman, did you have an opportunity to review that one?
Yeah, I did.
Do you, and same kind of thing on this one, if you want to discuss it, if you want to pull it and have any special discussion, you can. Otherwise, you can just move to deny the appeal and you would need a second and a vote.
I just had an operational question. I didn't have any questions on the case. I thought the dismissal was appropriate, but the patient, or not the patient, the complainant had a lengthy appeal letter, and they had expressed a lot of concerns. I just was wondering, when we dismiss, if this gets approved for dismissal, the letter, I mean, is there an option for like just to address some of the specific concerns that they had and to say that these were looked at and this is why it was felt that that those were those complaints weren't really warrant any sort of disciplinary action?
Yes, absolutely. One of the motions you can make is to deny the appeal, but direct staff to send a custom letter addressing the complainant's concerns and giving them a more detailed explanation. And you can include in your motion specific things you want us to include, or if you just want to delegate that to staff, you can just make the motion that grant the move to deny the appeal, but direct staff to send a custom letter of the complainant addressing the concerns raised in their appeal letter.
Yeah, okay. Then I would make a motion to deny the appeal, and I'd like to see the complaint receive a custom letter, specifically addressing. I guess before I make the appeal, do we have time to talk about a little bit of the details of the case?
Yes, and then you can, if you can discuss those in open session without mentioning the name of the complainant or the respondent, we could do that in open session. If you have specifics that you want to get into that might involve more specific details, we can go into executive session for legal advice. So kind of depending on what specifically, if you think you can discuss it without mentioning any names, it's probably okay to go ahead and do that now.
Okay. I think I can do that. I just so the general issue at hand was whether or not a technologist had performed whether or not a technologist had performed multiple exams, CT exams on a patient, and then not recorded that multiple exams had been performed. And the complainant had witnessed the CT scan being activated 3 times at least in their recollection, and so they thought there must be 3 CT scans that had been obtained, but after an initial investigation that was performed by the, I believe, the Department of Health Services into this event as well, they had found that what had happened was the patient had received 2 scout films, which are just normal lining up exams for the CT scan, followed by the actual diagnostic CT scan. So the 3 scans the patient had perceived were 2 scout studies followed by the diagnostic CT scan. And the complainant was very concerned because the report had stated from the radiologist had stated that the exams were done using an axial technique, whereas the dose report from the CT scan had said helical technique. And so the complainant had perceived that the helical technique must have been a different exam than what the radiologist had actually read, when in reality, 1 helical exam had been performed, which had been divided into 2 separate exams that were sent over as axial images, which the radiologist had reported. So an axial, what the radiologist had reported as axial is essentially synonymous with the helical exam. So I think it's important that the complainant realizes that we did look at this idea of the patient or having received multiple CT scans, and all the data or all the information that we could find, including the way the complainant described their own experience, points to this being 1 CT exam that had 2 scouts with a helical acquisition diagnostic exam that was then subsequently split into 2 separate CT studies using reformatting technique and sent to the radiologist for interpretation. So that's kind of the gist of the complainant's issue. And so keeping that in mind, I mean, if anyone has any comments, but if no one has any comments, I'd like to make an appeal to approve the dismissal with a custom letter saying that we looked at that radiation dose issue and there really wasn't any any inappropriate practice by the technologist found.
I think at this time it'd be appropriate to call for a second, and then if anybody has any discussion after it's seconded.
I'll second that motion.
Let's second it. And then did anybody else have any discussion or any questions for Mr. Beckman? Okay. Then all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, that motion carries. And Mr. Beckman, you're some of that went a little bit over my head. I might check with Dr. Brett when we go to write the custom letter, but we may actually run a copy of that by you as well.
I would be very happy to. I mean, again, the complainant had they put a lot of effort into their appeal, and so I just want to make it clear that we did I did look at everything, and I just would like to address their concerns. Thanks.
Sure, we will take care of it. Thank you very much. And that completes agenda item 11. I think.
Yeah, I think Dr. Beckman's providing really good customer care, because this is not an uncommon occurrence at all of multiple scans on infant child that comes into the ER. So you may want to save that letter for future reference. All right, thank you so much. We will move on to item number 12, a consideration and approval of determination of default.
All right, thank you. This is Amy Swanholm, litigation manager. I'll be making the presentation for this default determination. So just to give you a brief summary of where we're at with Joshua Kornman. This is an individual who was indicted for wire fraud in 2020. January 2021, he was found guilty of wire fraud, which is a felony offense. In August 2021, after an investigation, board staff filed a SOA complaint on this matter. Mr. Kornman did not appear. He has not made an entrance. He has not responded at this point. And so based on the failure to respond, an administrative law judge at the State Office of Administrative Hearings, or SOA, entered a default dismissal order in February of 2022. So based on that, and based on Mr. Kornman's continued lack of response to the board through all of our mailings and all of our contacts through his address of record, we're asking you to adopt the default order in front of you today. It's number 4 in that item. It is here for your review and consideration, and you would need a vote on that if you want to take action.
Any comments or motions?
So I would want to, this is when we would recommend that we go with the original decision, right? Since he hasn't been responding and everything.
So generally when we have a licensee who is under investigation, and we have made numerous attempts to contact them to get their response, they do have an obligation to respond to the board and to participate in any sort of investigation or any subsequent disciplinary action that might be brought by the litigation staff. So yes, at this point, I mean, even if he had responded, board staff does feel confident that the felony conviction would have given you authority to move forward with some sort of disciplinary action. Based on his failure to respond, the only option that we really have for you today is to enter a default order against this individual.
Okay. Then that's what I would like to recommend. Is that the wording, a default?
So you can make a motion that would be, I make a motion to adopt the default order.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to adopt the default order.
I'll second that.
All right, so Ms. Parker has made a motion to adopt the default order, seconded by Ms. Morell. I'm sorry, Ms. Waddell. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All against? All right, the motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item number 13, consideration and approval of proposal for decision, which there is none. Item number 14, consideration and approval of modification request, termination request orders, none. Item number 15, discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding agreed orders. I see 3 items there.
This item does require a vote to approve.
Okay,
Well, I
Right.
move to approve all 3 agreed orders.
I'll second the
I'll
motion.
second.
all right, so I have a motion to approve all 3 agreed orders by Mr. Beckman and seconded by Mr. Moran. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any against? Okay, the motion passes. All right, moving on to next item number, which is item number 16, discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding remedial or plans. And once again, we need a motion. Okay, go ahead, please.
I move to approve the one remedial plan.
I'll second.
All right. So Dr. Beckman made a motion to approve the remedial plan as stated, seconded by Ms. Landreth. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Nay. Okay, that passes. All right, moving on to item number 17, discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding mediated statement orders. Once again, need a motion.
I move to approve the one mediated settlement order as written.
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve the mediated settlement order by Dr. Beckman and seconded by Ms. Lutz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Nay. Okay. Next, item number 18, discussion, recommendation, possible action regarding non-pro-tunc orders. There are none. Item number 19, consideration and approval of cease and desist orders. There are none. Item number 20, consideration and approval of agreed resolutions. There are none. Item number 21, consideration and approval of consent orders. Once again, we need a motion.
I motion to approve let me see, what's the correct verbiage for that? Let me say.
Consent order, yeah. Staff's
Consent
proposed
order.
consent order.
Okay.
Thanks, Ms.
Yeah.
Becker.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the consent orders on that one case, and I have a second by Ms. Waddell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any against? Okay, that motion passes. Next item is item number 22, report on cease and desist orders approved by Executive Director. There are none. Item number 23, report on automatic orders actions. Anything there?
Hello, this is Amy Swanholm, again, litigation manager. Yep, I have nothing to report.
Thank you so much. Moving on to item number 24, discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding the proposed amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 194, Medical Radiologic Technology.
Right, there are no proposed rules.
Next, item number 25, discussion, recommendation, possible action regarding the adoption of proposed amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 194, Medical Radiologic Technology.
There are none.
Okay, and that moves on us to item number 26, which is open forum for public comments.
Okay. So at this time, you would just call for anyone who is attending remotely to raise your hand or turn on your camera and your microphone. You can let us know that you'd like to make a statement. If there's anyone in the room with you, Dr. Khan, obviously that would be their opportunity to make a statement.
So there's no one in the
See
room.
one? Okay.
Is there anyone online?
So I don't see any hands. I don't see anyone. Let's see here. Just gonna do one more head check here, head count. I don't see anyone attempting to speak.
I agree, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right. So you didn't see anybody. I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Oh,
Tatiana.
right. We do not see anyone who is attending remotely that has indicated that they would like to speak.
Okay, great. So we will move on to item number 27, which is consideration and approval of the February 4, 2022 board meeting minutes and action items. Do you have a motion?
I'll move to approve the February 4th board meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes and action items from February 4, 2022 by Ms. Landreth and seconded by Ms. Waddell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Nay. All right, so we move on to item number 28. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, I have a motion to adjourn by Ms. Lutz and seconded by Dr. Beckman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you so much. This concludes the June 24th meeting of the Texas Board of Medical Radiologic Technology.
It's 10:13 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody take care. Be safe.